I'm the founder of this nonprofit initiative called Emana in El Salvador, and currently I'm doing a PhD degree in the University of Maryland.
My name is Kirk Wright. I'm from Winnipeg, Canada, and I'm currently studying economics at McGill University.
So the way we got together was very interesting, but we'll leave it to the end probably. So a little quick overview of the place. Tasajera Island, or Isla Tasajera, is technically, it's in the coast of El Salvador, and it's technically an island because it is basically cut out by some mangrove stories and Lempa River, one of the main river in El Salvador. And there's two settlements that add up to about 1,500 people. So very rural, very poor, very out there. And I guess just getting into the goals of this was to establish an indicator framework that was adaptable to the priorities of this community, a small community. Established meaningful engagement and communication channels with it.
We also wanted to collect reliable data and present it in a meaningful way. The first part of that is quite straightforward, but the meaningful way was a very unique challenge for this community because we were functioning outside of the sort of traditional indicator system framework that we can see in the United States and in Canada. We also wanted to build an organizational framework that ensured ownership and continuity of the project, another really unique challenge that we faced. And then use lessons learned to develop a model for replication, because this project was developed at the lowest cost possible and the highest degree of replicability possible. Just kind of following the theme of open data that people have been talking about, we wanted to make this something that people could use and adopt elsewhere.
Before we go to the next one, I just want to mention that we came into this project with a sustainable development framework. We wanted to be in the sustainable development mindset, as it is, very clearly a more like a development sort of approach, interventionalist, if you may, but more like we wanted to be able to contribute a tool for the local community to see if they can improve their own governance and inform external actors that go inside as well. So a very important role of this when you're coming from an outside, because we don't inhabit, we don't live in the island. However, we did spend a lot of time there working in this project. But how did we engage with the community? How did we make the bonds enough to understand how the system works locally? So it was very important to come in with the social and ecological systems mindset, trying to observe the situation and learn how the system runs on its own. So we work primarily with the Community Development Association. It's a legal entity which works as a board that represents the community and is acknowledged and recognized by the municipality. However, we work with them clearly to establish governance links, but we wanted to establish an open and participatory framework and a conversation that included environmental groups, economic groups, and social groups. As you can see, different cooperatives, committees, even youth representation that, to an extent, they don't all share same role of influence within the community, but we wanted to give them an opportunity to contribute to this. This later became the model to establish what is called here an advisory committee, a community advisory group, but we called it a stakeholder group that informed the process.
And I think it's important to note as well that we didn't include any government agencies or groups within this framework, which is something that it didn't happen on purpose originally, but it was interesting as we were working and looking at partners, it became clear that the existing framework within the community, which looks something like this, was more than enough to support the project.
Some of the little quick visuals of the community. We're based in this interesting facility where we held different focus group meetings, young meetings. This is a picture of a stakeholder meeting having different representations of the groups that we just saw, and as well as some of the interviews that we carried out.
And so for our organizational structure, we had a bit of a basic idea of what we wanted. You hear a lot of people talk about an advisory committee or a board on their indicator systems that end up providing a lot of steering to the project team. And we replicated that, certainly, but we realized that we needed something different. This was a different context. We couldn't force this model to fit. We needed to make the model fit the community and not try and force the community into the model. And so we decided to adopt a process-driven governance structure and let it evolve. So we realized we needed to engage key demographics, which ended up being stakeholders and youth were the two ones that we identified. We need to support the natural integration of the project into community infrastructures, so we took a really participatory approach. We wanted to allow for relatively rapid development of the system. And this was important because I was there for about 2 months and Daniel was there a little bit longer on the ground developing the system. And a lot of preparation went into that beforehand, but it's very difficult to establish the pilot initiative for this project in such a short period of time. We also wanted to ensure the continuity of the system, so this kind of goes with that second point of making sure things go forward and figuring out how to integrate it into existing infrastructure. So this is the organizational structure that ended up being sustained. The project team is formed by the two of us. We were in charge of project oversight, website development, and general operations. And this was excellent in the sense that it was expedient and we could get a lot done quite quickly. We consulted continuously with the community stakeholder group and the operations group. Though it was a little bit difficult, we found, in the sense that it was so small. We didn't like the fact that we could make decisions so quickly because we found that to be a problematic factor within the project, and we had a great participatory approach to it, but in the future it would be nice to have a larger group if we had more resources available to sort of add a new dimension of accountability. The stakeholder group is formed of leaders in the community. This included a pastor from the local church, people from ADESCO, the community development agency, people from the fishing group, youth representation, people from the women's cooperative. And they were really great and provided a lot of guidance for the project and really shaped it into what it's become. The community operations group is a group of entirely youth within the community who are now doing work on the ground, collecting data, providing communication for the project, and they're the ones really driving the project. So for our indicator selection, we started off with preliminary indicator assessment. These were ideas that were brought up by the two of us, by the stakeholder group, and by external advisors, and ideas that we've seen elsewhere, because this is a community that people like to share ideas a lot. And so this was very general discussions, just bringing up ideas of indicators that could be important. The stakeholder group was the group that really brought forward the really community-specific indicators. Then they passed through our indicator selection criteria, which you can view this on our website. We won't go into it too much because we don't have that much time, I guess. But it's meaningful, available, credible, and unbiased. The unbiased portion was a very important part to us. We didn't want to unnecessarily politicize the system. And then inclusion in the framework, and then work on the indicator. So this is our indicator framework. It's a brief overview. We have 16 indicators spanning 3 theme areas. As you can tell, society is a bit of a huge section with health and education and things that really should have their own theme areas. This was due to, it had to be this way because we had such a small pool of resources to draw from, but in the future it's likely to grow.
It's important to know that obviously we cannot, we're dealing in a vulnerable community, we're dealing in a developing world context. One of the main issues is in the rural areas is the data scarcity that is there. So maybe just to point out that we know a lot about how, for example, we know a lot about the problems that environment is causing at a larger scale to the country, like climate change, El Niño effect, agriculture yields. but we don't know a lot about what's going on and the impacts on the people's lives. But as we go in, we realize that these areas are very important, these indicators, but it's very hard to acquire data for each one of them in this context. Bearing that in mind, we wanted to, even though it's tailored to be locally relevant, we wanted to keep in mind also how the indicators can be linked to larger level indicator systems, information systems. So maybe having intentionally caters and specific indicators to the community, like specific fish catch to this community, a turtle sanctuary, which is very important for this particular community, being the largest, the community that sees the largest amount of sea turtles nest in the beach in El Salvador. So for their identity, for their economy, but as well we can link some of the perhaps a bit more general indicators, or ideally we would like to have that flexibility to see those indicators attached or maybe compared to national level and global level as we see the Sustainable Development Goals to some of the data sources that we use to populate our system. You can see that the green ones are quantitative data. Not that we can collect from an existing database, but for example, we can get education by going to the teacher, local school, and the director asking like, hey, what are your enrollments for this year? How is things going for this month? And they just pull out this dusty notebook with some handwritten things, and we just digitize everything. From that, fish catch, food prices, and things like this. And the other ones are more qualitative that we ask a lot of interviews. Although we try to keep interviews from all of them, having a local perspective on it. These are more reliant on that because there's no data about it. Just a quick mention on our partners, some local NGO, research projects, and some cooperation with some Spanish volunteers from the university there, that we were able to basically harness data.
So, Voices of Tasajera is the name we gave to the section of telling stories about Tasajera and sharing qualitative information and providing a background for some of the numbers. So we're actually not going to look at this video because we don't have that much time, but we'll go to our website just so you can see the online platform that we developed. This is the Tasajera Tides homepage. You can look it up online. There's some information about the community. You can also navigate our entire indicators framework through our main menu, but we'll go and look at education briefly just to show you, give you a little taste of what it's like. So here's our indicator theme page. It's the society. We talk a little bit about the society in Tasajera and what you can expect to find there, some of the issues that are facing the community. We'll look at education. So education, we've got a Voices of Tasajera entry. We also have some data here just to show you. We right now are using Tableau but we're looking at actually doing some of it hard-coded ourselves once we have more resources.
That's some of the data we collected, like that was handwritten, and we just.
And as you can tell, it's some really interesting data. We have data from 2015, and only 64% of the students that started the year ended the year in 2015. So that's quite a high dropout rate for 1 year. So there's some really interesting trends that we can see, and we're adding more and more data as it comes in because our community operations group is collecting more and more. I'll show you just a little taste of what Voices of Tasajera look like. Make sure we got enough. Again, very basic given the lack of resources that we had, but
maestra de educación formal, atiende también en la misma sección primer grado en el turno de la mañana. Por la tarde atiendo octavo y noveno grado, también unidos, y les imparto la asignatura de matemáticas y ciencias desde sexto grado hasta noveno. También en
attached to the video for when you get home and you can check it out. That's a little taste of what we have for our online platform and our Voices of Tasajera to supplement quantitative data when we do have it, and to provide at least some kind of a narrative on the trends that the community is facing in the absence of quantitative data. Another important piece of this project was replicability. These are some general things we looked at. I'll just go over them really quickly. We had a very low budget, like basically non-existent, to be perfectly honest. But this actually kind of got the creative juices flowing a little bit, and we got imaginative. We learned how to do some coding that we never thought we'd have to do, and we used a lot of open source tools, which is really great. Going forward, it would be nice to expand it into something a little bit more tangible. We also thought a lot about replicable approaches versus replicable concrete features. So, for example, our indicator framework, you can't just take that set of indicators and track it somewhere else and expect it to mean anything. I mean, most places aren't going to care about how many sea turtles are on their beaches. It's a really important thing within the community. What you can do is you can replicate the process we took to select the indicators. It was a very expedient process that was very collaborative at the same time. We think we did it in a fast period of time without compromising that collaborative approach, which was really rewarding. And then the scaling and specificity has to do a bit with that, and making sure that you are making sure that your project fits the community versus thinking the other way around. And you want to talk about vulnerable communities?
Yeah, specifically, perhaps the usefulness of such a system could be ideally applied as a complement to information systems that are more urban and are more mostly addressing the development needs and the impacts of communities in very damaging situations. So one quick point on this is that, as I said before, we know that most of the people in El Salvador lives in the rural areas, and this is the case for most of the developing world, perhaps to a more general extent. So although cities are very important to measure, given their pollution and their contribution to these things, the rural areas are where the people are mostly affected, especially in the coastal areas, as we see the climate change into this. So we went with this in mind, trying to understand how poor people mostly are, how we can measure this. Amazingly, the government doesn't know this information. And finally, some of the challenges that we faced, of course, in this kind of system is data collection. Just going out there ourselves, as we were trying to do 10 other things, we were dealing with hurdles through these collecting good quality, and also how we make data available for them. And avoiding bias and preserving the community vision was very important. Given the limited budget we had, we did rely on a lot of secondary data research and our own personal research, my own research that was used to build upon the indicator selection. And going forward, we see challenges in capacity building, developing partnership, addressing the audience to cater in the data, and a comprehensive growth plan. So I believe that I will just close with saying that some of the lessons learned, and some that we didn't right here, is very important training, capacity building in a data illiterate population. Right now, a lot of people in the United States are very data literate, and we just don't know how to handle that, and we're learning how to harness this. But in these locations, people have tools, but they don't have the know-how on how to do it. And governance mapping is a key point in understanding how a community works before trying to implement something. So, yeah.
So that's it. We have our emails here and website as well, which you're welcome to check out. I don't know if we have time for questions.
Yeah, there's still time for questions. Thank you very much. So we have a little bit of time for questions. I know it's the last session. I've got, I'll start off. Both of you guys talked about replication. I'm curious, from your side, how did the replication happen? Was that something that you pushed along, or was that something that happened organically? And for you guys, are there plans to replicate it or share the model in any kind of formal way? Package it up in some sort of way? So maybe perhaps you can start.
Well, many people in Latin America try to improve the way of how we measure